Good afternoon or good morning, possibly where you're coming at to listening to us from today. Welcome to Advanta IRAs, another great webinar in our series on how and why to add gold and silver to your portfolio. I'm excited today for this topic, mainly because we spend a lot of our webinars and educational sessions talking a lot about real estate investing and other similar investments to real estate. We haven't had anyone come on and talk about gold and silver in quite a while, so I'm really excited today for our guest speaker that we're going to have to talk about adding gold and silver as part of your IRA portfolio. My name is Scott Maurer. I'm the Director of Business Development for Advanta IRA. Been with the company now since 2006. Done a number of different things here at Advanta IRA. Spend most of my time now really just focusing on the business development side of the business, helping people get educated and helping other people understand what they can do with their self-directed IRA accounts, or I guess with any IRA account for that matter, and the different options that are out there. My contact information is on this screen. I'll certainly have it on again up at the end of the presentation today. If you have any questions afterwards or even throughout the presentation on self-directed IRAs in particular, please direct them to me. I'll be more than happy to answer them, or give me a call or shoot me an email after the presentation if you'd like. For those of you who are listening live today, if you have any questions as we go along, either for myself or for our guest host, guest presenter, please don't hesitate to type those questions into the question box on your screen. We'll make sure we get to those questions throughout the presentation, and we hopefully have some time at the end for some Q&A as well. Just a quick disclaimer on Advanta IRA is, again, that we don't provide any investment advice, any legal advice, or any tax advice, and we also do not endorse any particular investments as well. We encourage any individual to do their due diligence, not only on the investments they're looking to make inside their IRA account, but also the due diligence on the people that they are working with. That includes any guests of any webinars we've had on, or other people who've been introduced to Advanta IRA. If you are looking for a legal tax or possibly investment advice, you can certainly reach out to us. We can point you in the direction of a CPA or an attorney or someone else as well, who can help you get your questions answered from that particular point of view. So in a lot of our webinars and events, we do talk about legal and tax issues, but we cannot make a determination for you or give you specific legal or tax advice. Just a little bit about Advanta IRA in general. For those of you who are unfamiliar with us, we have almost 20 years in the industry now. And the only thing we do at Advanta is self-directed IRA account administration. So it's holding alternative assets inside of retirement accounts on behalf of our clients. We try to set ourselves apart from our competitors in the space in two components, really. One is our customer service experience. Any individual who signs up with Advanta IRA and becomes an account holder gets a dedicated account manager, one person here at our office that will help you with anything you need regarding your accounts. You'll have that individual's direct line, their direct email address, and we're very fast and responsive as well. The other way that we really seek to set ourselves apart really is our educational offerings. And today's webinar is yet just another example of what we try to do. We try to bring a lot of diverse speakers, a lot of diverse topics to our audience. Again, whether it's a webinar featuring just myself or one of my colleagues talking about the basics of self-directed IRAs, or events like today where we've brought in a guest speaker to talk specifically about one aspect of something related to self-directed IRAs. We do not currently doing any live events. Hopefully we will resume those soon when it comes to in-person events in either our Tampa or Atlanta office. But we have live webinars, usually 1 or 2 a week. And we also have a live networking session as well that we offer about every other Friday called Pitch, Promote, and Prosper. Be on the lookout for that. It's a rare opportunity in the self-directed community to attend a session where you can actually go on and pitch different investments that you may have that you're looking to sell, or possibly pitch any investments that you're looking to actually buy. And it's a great networking opportunity. We do that about every other Friday as well, so make sure to check our website out for that, and then the next upcoming date for that. This webinar is being recorded. Some of you who may be listening to this may be listening to the recorded version. If you do have any questions, then please reach out to me after you've viewed the entire webinar. But as far as webinars, any webinar that we do, they're all recorded and they're placed on our Advanta On Demand channel on YouTube. So if you do ever miss an event and we're unable to attend for any reason, certainly just go to our YouTube page, usually within a day or two after the live event, and we'll have that recording up on there for you to watch. So I want to quickly just cover a little bit about self-directed plans and then talk a little bit about precious metals from the self-directed IRA space before I turn it over to our guest presenter. As far as anyone's unfamiliar with self-directed IRAs, it's essentially the ability to take money that you have either in an IRA or possibly an old 401k plan and use that money to invest in a lot of different what we call alternative assets, things like I mentioned real estate, single family homes, multifamily investments, private placements, startup companies, a lot of different things you can invest in. And certainly, we're going to talk today and focus on the ability to invest directly into precious metals as part of your portfolio. Most brokerage firms, you're not going to be able to make these types of investments because it doesn't fit their business model to allow you to directly purchase real estate or precious metals within your retirement plan portfolio that you have with them. But it's important to note as well, we talk about self-directed plans, that self-directed is not a type of IRA specifically. It's rather referring to the ability to invest into a number of alternative assets. So the types of accounts that can be self-directed are any type of IRA. If you have your traditional or your Roth IRAs for individuals, if you're a small business owner, the SEP or the Simple IRA also offers you great tax deferred benefits, as well as the ability to contribute a lot more each year to a retirement account than does a traditional or Roth. We also offer a solo 401k plan for people who are sole proprietors, people who work for themselves without employees. But the other big area that gets missed when we talk about self-directed IRAs and people are interested in, again, investing into precious metals or real estate inside their IRA, is those former employer plans, the old 401ks, the old 403bs, the old 457 plans. When you leave an employer, you can take that money and roll it over into an IRA, or more specifically into a self-directed IRA account, and really open up your investment options. So if you're looking at your account statement, if it's a former employer plan or any type of IRA account, it's certainly something that can be self-directed into the assets that we're going to talk about today. And just kind of giving a brief overview of the precious metal investment from a standpoint of the IRA, there's a lot of different ways an IRA, I guess, could invest into precious metals. One would be purchasing directly, and this is going to be something we hit on today quite a bit, investing in coins that are minted by a government agency. For example, like the gold and silver American Eagles, the Canadian Maple Leafs, specific coins that meet a certain purity level are one type of precious metal investment. Through brokerage accounts, you may be able to invest in exchange traded funds, ETFs, that are the value of those ETFs are somewhat tied to the gold and silver market, but you're not, when you're investing in ETF, you're not investing directly into a physical coin, or in the case of the next block here, a bullion or bar, which is another type of physical precious metal investment that a lot of people choose to make inside a self-directed IRA. There are also other companies that deal in paper gold and gold certificates, where again, you're not actually buying the metal, but rather a certificate that is purported to be tied to actual physical metals. What we're going to focus on again today primarily are the actual coins that are minted by a government agency and the bullion and bars, where it's the physical precious metals that people are interested in buying. They don't want to place simply say $20,000 to $25,000 into an ETF or buying a gold certificate. They want to actually use that cash to buy a certain number of coins or bullion and bars. And using a self-directed IRA is the way you can do that to access those assets for your retirement account. Just some other important notes on precious metals. It's kind of make sure that if you're looking to buy precious metals inside your IRA account, I know this is something our guest is going to hit on as well. Make sure that the metal, typically the metal needs to be at least 99.5% pure gold, silver, platinum, etc. Some metals don't meet the IRS defined fineness requirements. So make sure that when you're looking to buy precious metals, that you are buying a metal that would be approved under IRS guidelines. Just because a coin was minted by a government does not automatically make it qualified for an IRA. So again, when you're doing your due diligence to buy the metals up front, make sure you're comfortable and make sure you have the right metals that you're purchasing that aren't going to be disqualified as an investment through the IRA. The IRS rules stipulate that an IRA owner should not have physical possession of their IRA-owned precious metals. So we're going to talk about with our guests today the storage facility that they offer, and certainly the ability to simply store your metals. But the IRS rules do not allow the IRA owner to have physical possession of the metals they purchase inside their IRA account. Some individuals have tried to get around this requirement by using a single member LLC, which we talk about from time to time here at Advanta, a checkbook LLC. But the IRS has specifically said that using a single member LLC is not an acceptable arrangement to get around the rule that you should not have physical possession of that IRA-owned precious metal. So when you buy precious metals and physical precious metals through your IRA account, you do have to have a third party acting as the custodian and storage to have that physical possession of the precious metals. And although the precious metals coins can be used as legal currency, you cannot use metals as a contribution to your IRA account. So if you're ever looking to add money on an annual basis to your IRA, say for example, a traditional IRA, you could put in $6,000 this year into an IRA account per IRS guidelines. That contribution has to be made in actual cash. It cannot be made as in the form of the coins. If you own coins personally, you can't just simply contribute those to your IRA. You would actually have to put other cash into your account and use that cash to buy the precious metals. So again, as we go forward, again, if you're looking at the different metals and trying to figure out what exactly is going to qualify, making sure that it's being handled properly, making sure that it's being stored properly, most gold dealers can help you determine obviously which products that you're are going to meet that IRS criteria, and also make sure you're doing your due diligence to be satisfied with what you are buying and paying for. So today I want to introduce our guest presenter. His name is Mark Yaxley. He's the General Manager of Strategic Wealth Preservation. He's been working in the precious metals industry since 2006. And Strategic Wealth Preservation is an international precious metals dealer and secure storage provider based in the Cayman Islands. On this slide, we can certainly send out a copy of the slides to anyone who requests them. There is a YouTube link if you want to learn more specifically about SWP, and you can connect with Mark as well at this email address. I'm sure Mark will share more of his contact information as we go along. Before I bring Mark on, just also want to again reiterate, if you're listening to this presentation live, you have a question box on your GoToWebinar screen. Get those questions typed in there. I'll make sure that we get those asked of Mark as we go along the presentation today. But Mark, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Scott. Thank you.
All right, Mark, I'm going to switch the presentation controls over to you and let you get started. Anything else you want to add about yourself and certainly about strategic wealth preservation, I'll turn the presentation over to you.
No, it was a great intro. Thanks, Scott. And we will touch a little bit more on the company later on. So I'll jump right into it. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, if you can, just see your screen's up now, and I'll mute myself. And again, if anyone has any questions as we go along, please get those typed in.
Well, again, thank you, Scott. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I look forward to sharing my precious metals knowledge with you all. I think it's a great time to be talking about precious metals, especially considering what we've all lived through in the last 18 months with the uncertainty that COVID-19 has caused in the global economy. It's led to just a record-setting bull run for both gold and silver. It's been a great experience to be a member of the industry over the last 18 months. We've seen a new all-time record high in the price of gold, and we've seen just really absurd demand for physical precious metals to the point where the industry has actually had a bit of a challenge keeping up. So great time to be talking about this, and to touch on what Scott mentioned earlier, usually the biggest challenge or thing that prevents people from investing in precious metals, whether it be inside an IRA or outside an IRA, is the education piece. So that's really what I'm here to do today, is to give you that basic education so that you can feel comfortable moving forward and further investigating this investment option. The level of knowledge amongst the audience is probably quite varied. I'm going to start with the basics in the first part of this presentation to get everybody comfortable. When we're talking about physical precious metals, what is it really that we mean, and some of the fundamental pieces of that conversation. And from there, we'll move forward with some charts and data, some historical information, to kind of set the stage for the second and third part of the presentation, which we'll talk about the investment cycle, buying, storing, and selling. We'll get into the nuts and bolts about how each part of that investment cycle works for precious metals. And lastly, we'll close out by diving a little bit more into the pricing. When you're negotiating and when you're buying or selling with a precious metal dealer, what are the pieces of that transaction that you should be looking at so that you're well informed and then you can make the right decisions and buy the best products available to you at hopefully the lowest premiums. I think there'll be some time left at the end for some FAQs, and I really look forward to your questions. Please don't be shy. I've heard just about every question in my career related to precious metals, some very complex, some very simple, and I look forward to hearing from you, at any time or at the end of the presentation. So I'm going to get started now, just with some basics. Here on the screen, you see two physical investment grade precious metal products. So these are two examples of what Scott mentioned earlier that would qualify for a precious metal IRA. On the left, you have the 1 ounce gold Canadian maple leaf coin. And on the right, you've got a 100 ounce Royal Canadian Mint silver bar. So these are, I just wanted to provide a visual when we talk about precious metals. What is it that you're actually getting? These are two examples of physical products that you can purchase and you can take a receipt of, or you can put inside of your IRA. And I wanted to start by just pointing out some of the finer details of each product, because these are important, although super fundamental, super basic, so important for you to feel comfortable and understand what you're actually buying. The first thing that you're going to notice on any investment grade bullion product is obviously the type of metal. Now, I know that sounds kind of ridiculous. Everyone knows that gold is yellow and that silver is kind of this shiny gray color, but it's actually quite important because when you get into platinum and palladium, they all look like silver. Silver, platinum, and palladium all look the same. So it's important that the producer of the product actually tells us when they strike that product what it consists of. Also, another important piece of information when you're looking at physical precious metals is the weight or quantity of pure metal that you're receiving. So in this case, it's a 1 ounce pure gold coin. In the case of the silver bar on the right, you'll notice it says 100 TR ounces. That's 100 troy ounces. So that bar contains 100 ounces of pure silver. For those of you that have good eyes, you can probably read the words Royal Canadian Mint in that logo, in that emblem. That's the hallmark of the producer. There are a number of recognized, reputable producers, either sovereign mints like the US Mint, the Canadian Mint, the Australian Mint, the Perth Mint of Australia. And then you have other very reputable brands like Pamp Suisse, Credit Suisse, Johnson Matthey. They always hallmark their products so that we know as members of industry and also you as investors, where is this coming from, who produced it, and it gives us assurance that the product is legitimate. Also very important, and you've probably already noticed by looking at these pictures, you've got the 4 nines on both. Now in the jewelry world, they usually use the term 24 karat to indicate that something is pure. In the investment bullion world, we use the decimal system. And what these 4 nines means is that these products are 99.99% pure. The refiner, the producer, has refined all of the impurities, other impurities out of the metal and are left with this pure gold or silver product. And that's important when you talk about IRAs because it has to meet the minimum requirement of 0.995. So both of these products would qualify. And lastly, here with the silver bar, you see a unique serial number. This is another way to track the product, to audit the product, to determine legitimacy of the product. So these are the standard features of physical precious metals. Next, I just want to a quick high-level overview of price, because it's important that you understand when you look at the price of gold or silver, what does that mean? Because we all see it on the news at night during the financial reporting part of the news, or when you're reading the newspaper, you might see it, or on your phone if you have an app where you check the value of your stocks. You're going to see the gold price, and you're like, well, what does that gold price mean? That price is the global value of 1 pure ounce of gold at that point in time. Just like a stock, the price is going to change throughout the day. It's going to go up, it's going to go down. But at that point in time, when you see that price, it means that the global value in US dollars of 1 ounce of gold is, in this case, $1,786. And I put the pictures of the silver and gold coin there so you got an idea of how much gold are we talking about when we see that price. And to give you another visual, this is me holding a 1 ounce gold coin in my hand. So it gives you an idea of the size. It's not much bigger than a quarter, a US quarter. and it's a very dense metal. And obviously, it gives you an idea of just how valuable gold is in terms of quantity compared to value. It's the size of a quarter, but it's worth yesterday it was trading at $1,786 an ounce. So I just wanted to point out how what does that price mean? How much gold are we talking about when we see that price? And we'll come back to price in a little bit more detail later on in the presentation.
Hey, Mark, if I could ask you a quick question. I know obviously you're showing there the 1 ounce coin in your hand. I believe I'm aware they also, does the Canadian Mint or the US Mint, do they also do like smaller denominations, like tenths of an ounces or things like that? Or are those only made by other institutions?
Well, there's a variety of sizes available to investors, Scott, that are produced by a number of reputable mints and refineries around the world. But to answer your question, yes, the U.S. Mint does start, I believe, at 1/20th of an ounce. So it's about the size of the tip of your pinky finger in diameter. And then you can buy products all the way up in terms of gold. You can go all the way up to a 400-ounce gold bar. Those are the ones you see in the movies, whenever, like in the Italian Job, or whenever they're robbing a bank, they always go with the big 400-ounce gold bars, and they look super light in the movies, but they're really heavy, I can tell you from experience. So you've got this range from a few $100s worth of gold all the way up to a few $100,000 worth of gold that you can buy in different denominations. And on the silver side, it goes generally from 1 ounce of silver. Really, when you're talking about investment grade silver, it goes from 1 ounce of silver up to all the way up to 1,000 ounces, and that's about 70 pounds of pure silver. These huge bricks of silver. So all options for investors to consider.
Okay, yeah, thanks for answering. Again, if anyone who's listening live, you have any questions as we go along, just get those typed into the question box. We'll make sure we get those over to Mark. So thanks, Mark.
No problem. All right, so just shifting gears a little bit, I wanted to throw in a couple of slides to give everybody an idea of the historical performance of gold. And also we're gonna look at specific points in time when gold really performs at its best, so that you get an understanding of the true value of gold in your portfolios. So here you have the 20-year chart going back to the year 2000, and so it's actually about a 21-year-old chart at this point, and all the way up till yesterday. So the first thing you'll notice is it's a pretty good looking chart. If you invested in gold back in 2000, you've made over a 500% return. It's a kind of a slow, gradual upswing. I often kind of relate gold to real estate because it's a long-term investment. You really get the best out of holding gold and silver if you're willing to commit to it for the long term. And the second thing you'll note, and we'll come back to that in just a minute, is there's kind of peaks and valleys like any chart, but there's some pretty strong peaks in this chart, and we're going to come back to that in a minute, and I'm going to explain why during those certain periods of time gold and silver do particularly well. Looking at the 5-year chart, again, this is a very positive trend for gold, about a 45% return over the last 5 years. So that's an average of about 9% per year. You do notice that a lot of that upswing actually happened in really the last 24 months. And that was in large part thanks to COVID. It unsettled the markets. It created a lot of uncertainty. And when the markets are uncertain, investors, not only private investors like you and I, but also central banks and the ETFs will purchase a lot of gold, or you'll see a lot of purchasing activity from those institutions, from those central banks that are hedging against that market risk. So an interesting trend developing in the last 2 years, and that's highlighted a little bit in this 1-year chart where we climbed all the way up to the all-time record high for gold of $2,030. And then we've seen a little bit of a gradual decrease. So you've got a little bit of a downtrend as people's expectations were that COVID was ending and that things are getting better. But what we've actually seen in the last 60 days is, again, a strong upward trend for the price of gold. And I really wanted to highlight this because I think it's exciting for people that don't yet own gold and silver. Now is actually a really interesting buying opportunity because we've seen the price come down off the all-time highs. So you're benefiting from a cheaper gold price, but at the same time, we're embarking on another leg of a potentially large upswing. So it's an interesting time to be thinking about adding these metals to your portfolio and not buying them at the all-time high, which is always a little bit of a risk. So just coming back to that 20-year chart And this is probably the number one takeaway from today's lesson or presentation is what purpose does gold serve in my portfolio? Because you probably have real estate, I'm sure you have shares, and you might be wondering, like, what role is gold going to fill in my portfolio? And I think this chart really highlights the number one benefit of gold, or its positioning within a portfolio, which is of wealth insurance. You buy and you own gold to hedge against other asset classes in your portfolio. And the perfect example that I use all the time when I'm trying to illustrate this point to people is the last financial crisis, prior to the COVID crisis, but the last financial crisis when the housing bubble occurred. We saw the housing market collapse in the United States. We saw bankruptcy of some major financial institutions, and really a global recession. And during that period of time, the average person lost 30 or 40% of their portfolio value over, a 2 to 3 year period. And yet gold rose 140% during that period of time. So the lesson here is that if you own gold either prior or in the early stages in that 2008, 2009 part of the crisis, if you added precious metals even right at the beginning of that, you're able to hedge your other losses in other asset classes, and you actually either came out even if you had the right percentage or right ratios, or you even came ahead during an extremely challenging period of time in the economy's history. And what's interesting, fast forwarding now through the next cycle of precious metals is, really inspired again by the COVID crisis, we've seen the same kind of uptick over the last 18 months. Again, gold entering that kind of bullish market, hitting an all-time high. And again, it's when there's risk and when there's losses in other asset classes, which we saw, in my own portfolio, it was offset nicely by holding precious metals. So really a great takeaway here if you're wondering, what role does this play in my portfolio? Now, I just wanted to have kind of a side-by-side, because I often get the question from investors is like, which is better, gold or silver? Which one should I own? If I'm only going to own one, which one should it be? Now, my first answer is always you should own both. And we're going to talk a little bit later about diversifying amongst the precious metals in your portfolio so you can have a nice balance of gold, silver, and some platinum or palladium. But I wanted to show you just kind of how the relationship of gold and silver work. You're going to notice the charts are almost identical in terms of their general trend line, but you'll notice that silver is more volatile during those bull markets, or during those markets where gold becomes, front page news and everyone's rushing in the gold market. Silver will track that gold price, and actually it'll beat it. During the last financial crisis, silver went from about $8 an ounce all the way up to almost $50 an ounce. That was like a $400 return during that period of time. If you timed it right, you did extremely well with silver. And again, we're seeing that again in the last 18 months. Silver had a really good run. It was up about 80% last year. But the lesson is silver is also volatile in the down market. So, just the takeaway there, if you're wondering, how does silver behave and should I have some silver in my portfolio? The answer is yes, I think you should, but just be mindful it will be more volatile than gold, generally speaking. And lastly, to end on the portion of the presentation that touches on numbers, and this is the second takeaway I think is really important. One of the reasons to own precious metals in the first place is diversification. Again, it's that hedge against everything else that you probably own. And the lesson here is that even within your precious metals portfolio, so you might start by buying some gold and either in your IRA or outside of your IRA, and then later add in some silver. But I also want you to think about the platinum group metals, which consists of platinum, palladium, and rhodium. Now, unfortunately, rhodium can't be held in an IRA, I don't believe, but you can hold platinum and palladium in an IRA. And I just wanted to include the historical numbers for both platinum and palladium. And what you need to know, and again, there's a lot more to dive into here, and you can go and do your research, and we're happy to help you with answering those questions. These are industrial metals, platinum and palladium. They're used almost entirely, the entire consumption globally for platinum and palladium is in catalytic converters in automobiles. And these these metals have some very unique attributes that help during the detoxification of the emissions from catalytic converters. They're very small markets. Not a lot of this metal comes out of the ground. And they've done extremely well if you look at them since the year 2000, especially palladium. Just a fantastic return. It's actually done better than gold. So it's nice to not only own some gold on the side as part of your portfolio, but within that precious metals portfolio, you can think about adding maybe 10% of platinum and palladium as well to give yourself even more diversification in your overall portfolio while benefiting from the potential upside of these industrial metals. Scott, I was going to ask, maybe we're going to move into the second part of the presentation, if there are any questions that have come up so far, or if you have anything else you want to throw out there.
Yeah, Mark, I was actually going to ask, and I know you're not a financial advisor, and certainly nor are we. I just was curious if you had any indication, especially when you talk about gold and silver and other metals, really as a hedge against inflation and to protect really against the downturn of other assets. Do you have any idea of, from maybe some of your clients and people you've worked with, what percentage of their portfolio that they allocate to precious metals as part of a diversification strategy?
Yeah, it's a very good question and a common question. And it's actually the answer that you will find online is very misleading, unfortunately. And again, that goes back to the education piece for precious metals, because unfortunately, it's not a story that your banker will tell you, or in a lot of cases, your financial advisor will tell you. And that's why it's so great that you guys offer the self-directed IRAs where people can own precious metals. So long story short, if you go online right now and you search like how much precious metals should I own, the typical answer is going to be, if there's an answer at all, the typical answer is going to be 5 to 10% of your portfolio. And if you don't own any precious metals right now, I can tell you that owning some is better than none at all. But that number of 5 to 10% was based on a study done back in the 1980s, where they took a portfolio that included equities and bonds and precious metals, and they tried to come up with a ratio of each that would be most adequate during a period of time, I believe from the 1970s to the 1980s. Unfortunately, nobody has really taken the time to rerun that data or publish that data over, in modern times. And when that was done in 2017, I believe was the last time that I read a report on it, the ideal percentage of precious metals was actually closer to 22%. So I know that seems really high because we've always been told it's 5 or 10%, but that 5 or 10% is a very outdated piece of data. The market's a lot more volatile these days. We've seen some pretty dramatic crises in the last 10 to 20 years. So maybe that's a reason why that number is increased. But bottom line, if you don't own any, you should own some. 5% is better than none. But my clients are definitely longer than the 5 or 10% in most cases.
Okay, yeah, thanks for the answer. We did have a couple questions pop up from some of the listeners and the attendees. I guess you probably might get into this a little bit later, but someone asked if they could get a copy of the insurance policy that is issued prior to buying metals with you.
Yes,
yeah. Okay.
We do publish what's called an evidence of insurance letter. It's issued to us by our broker, which sells us the insurance. We're insured by Lloyd's of London. Our broker is Marsh. Both are specialized in the insurance of precious metals, and we do issue that to the clients upon demand. Yes.
Gotcha. And then another question came up. You're talking about platinum, palladium, and the use, their use in automobiles and catalytic converters specifically. The question says, do you think the move to electric vehicles will hurt the value of palladium, and is it used somewhere else as well, maybe in a different market that would offset any decline in the use in the automobile industry?
It's a very good question. A question that you've seen a lot in the last 2 to 3 years. And what's really interesting is that when I started in precious metals back in 2006, the price of palladium was about $500 an ounce. Today, it's over $2,800 an ounce. Even with the introduction of electric cars, and in some regions of the world where electric is a viable option, maybe not so much here in Canada where I live, where we have cold winters and electric doesn't work as well, for example. There is a push towards electric. But when you look at the overall demand for platinum and palladium, it continues to rise. There's a declining supply of platinum and palladium as well. And if you look at the numbers in terms of auto production, overall growth is still larger in traditional combustion engine vehicles than it is in electric, believe it or not. And the reason for that is because China and India, two developing kind of second world, China on the verge of first world right now, but these are countries where people are buying their first vehicles ever. You know, that middle class in those countries didn't exist previously. And now that those middle classes are able to buy vehicles, you're seeing a huge markets open up for these traditional combustion engines, which includes like scooters and mopeds and things that people drive in those places. And their governments are starting to regulate emissions. So you're seeing platinum and palladium go into those engines. So even though electric is a big deal in terms of potential growth in the future, and I totally agree, there's a growth sector there, you're still seeing a lot of growth in traditional engines. And so experts think that we're quite a ways away from platinum and palladium's prices dropping as a result of that.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, we had another question pop up, and it's good to talk about the cost of safekeeping precious metals with you, which I think you'll probably get into it a little bit later. So why don't we continue on the presentation? Again, great questions coming so far from the attendees. So please keep those coming up or coming in, and I'll make sure we get them asked of Mark as he proceeds.
Great, yeah, some really good questions actually. And we will touch on storage and safekeeping as part of this next module of the presentation. So, you know, the slide we're looking at here, very high level, this is kind of the life cycle of owning precious metals. You purchase the precious metals. If it's physical, you have to consider where you're going to keep it. Is it going to be something I keep at home? Is it something that I'm going to pay a third-party company like our company SWP to store on my behalf? And eventually you have to sell it. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on each one of these stages, and I'm going to give you some general information about each. We'll start with buying. And these are really more or less, it's not so much a step-by-step guide on how to buy, because Scott and Advanta, if you're doing it in an IRA, can tell you how that works. And if you're doing it outside an IRA, we can tell you how that works. This is really kind of questions you also need to be answering, or boxes you need to check as you go through that whole thought process. So the first thing that you're going to want to do, obviously, is determine the quantity or value of the investment. Now, if it's in an IRA, you might have some funds already on account with Advanta, or you might have like an annual contribution limit. So that might determine how much you're investing. If it's outside of an IRA, you're going to want to answer that question that we just talked about, is what percentage of my overall investment portfolio do I want to allocate to precious metals? That's really kind of the starting point for your buying process. The next thing that you want to think about is, what are the types of metals? Am I only going to do gold? Am I looking for that kind of historically proven, trusted asset in gold? Or do I want to spice things up? Do I want to put some silver in that portfolio? I'm going to get a little bit more of the highs during the good times. I'm going to get a little bit more of the lows. Silver becomes a little bit more of a trade, if you will, where you can play off the markets a little bit more. And then do you want to think about platinum and palladium? You know, do you want to try to get some of that upside that we saw in palladium the last few years? It's just been an incredible run. Not to mention rhodium, by the way, which is over $30,000 an ounce now. It's just, you know, ridiculous. The path that rhodium is on. So you're going to want to try to determine. And again, I say to most investors who are starting out, why not start with one metal? And if you're only going to do one, I would generally say get gold in your portfolio, because it's kind of a pillar of any portfolio, and then you can think about adding in the future. The next box you have to check is which products do I want to own? Now, if it's inside of an IRA, you want to make sure that it's, you know, meeting the purity minimums. You want to get those 3.9s and 4.9 products. There are lists that are publicly available of what the IRS will accept inside of an IRA. You can also check out our website. There's a variety of products, like we answered earlier, Scott, that range all the way from, 1/20th of an ounce all the way up to 1,000 ounces. So a lot of options depending on your budget and depending on your exit strategy. When you sell, how much do you want to sell every time? And those are questions and discussions you can have with a precious metals dealer. You would contact your dealer. In this case, you can contact us for a quote. We provide you with a quote based on the real-time pricing, and we're going to talk about pricing in just a few slides, so that you understand, like, when you're actually buying and selling, how does that work? How do we price that purchase for you? you would accept it. We call it locking in your order. When you lock in your order, you've kind of committed, well, not kind of, you've committed contractually to a purchase or a sale. And so is the dealer. So when you agree on that price based on the market at that point in time, whatever happens after that agreement has taken place, whether the market goes up, whether the market goes down, you've both committed to that purchase or sale based on that price at that point in time. And then you pay for your order. If it's outside of an IRA, you generally would pay by bank wire or transfer or check. And if it's inside an IRA, then the funds would come from the custodian to the precious metals dealer to settle that transaction. So once you've purchased precious metals, then the question becomes, well, what am I going to do with them? So I wanted to give everybody kind of an overview of the 3 options that are available to them in terms of storage or safekeeping. The first option is to hire a third party, or the first option I have here, and generally this might be something you would consider once you've accumulated a fair amount of precious metals, or if you're investing a fair amount of precious metals. You would hire a vaulting company to store your metals. The advantages there are that the metals are going to be fully insured. So if there's a loss for whatever reason, whether it be a physical loss, theft or fire or natural disaster or employee infidelity, all of those things are insured. Also, in most storage facilities, you can also sell your precious metals at any given time. So you can like literally pick up the phone or go online and place a sell order and give instructions to take those metals from your storage unit and sell them to the precious metals dealer or the vault operator. In our case, we do both. So you have complete liquidity during regular business hours. So it makes it very easy for people to buy and sell. And then you also have the advantage of these precious metals being audited, which is important because you want to make sure that you receive a third party's confirmation that the metals actually are there and that you haven't just holding a receipt that says you own precious metals. There are physical bars and coins that are allocated to you in this storage facility. So those are kind of some of the highlights for vault storage. What we see commonly, and what a lot of people have done historically, is use safe deposit boxes inside of banks, which is, I agree, a safer place than most people's homes. But there's a few things that people need to be aware of when they're hiring a safe deposit box in a bank. Number one is generally the bank will not insure the contents of that safe deposit box. So if the bank happens to be robbed or there's employee infidelity and an employee enters the safe deposit box or anything goes missing inside that safe deposit box, it's not going to be insured. So you probably don't want to store your life savings or $100,000 or anything worth of precious metals in a safe deposit box. It's also somewhat illiquid because you actually physically have to go down to the bank, take it out of the bank, travel to the precious metal dealer to sell it or ship it to a precious metal dealer. So you don't get the same liquidity because most banks do not buy and sell precious metals, thank God, because it's not something they do very well historically. Those who have done it charge very high premiums, and the average teller doesn't really know a lot about gold and silver. So it's not a great place to buy gold and silver, in my opinion. And lastly is the fact it's not going to be audited. So again, you can self-audit your box, obviously, but if you're at a distance, if your box happens to be in another state, another country in some cases, unless you're there personally, there's nobody else who's going to be able to audit your box and confirm that your holdings are still there. And the last option, of course, a lot of people store it at home. And I am a proponent of storing some precious metals at home. I think having some close by that you can liquidate in a pinch is a good thing because gold and silver really are money. They're very liquid. They always hold value. I wouldn't so much recommend that you barter these things because I think the barter economy is kind of phasing out, but you can definitely sell them and use that money in an emergency. But I wouldn't keep too much because again, they're not insured. If they're stored in your home, generally your home insurance policy will not insure precious metal bullion or investment products. So check your home insurance. If you are holding a lot of gold and silver at home and you think it's insured, take a look, make sure. And again, it kind of exposes you to a certain amount of risk, whether it be a teenage son or daughter, or whether it be a neighbor who might know that you own the precious metals. It does expose you to some physical risk. So again, if you're going to hold precious metals at home, I would recommend it's about $10,000 or less Think about it as cash. I don't know how much cash you'd feel comfortable holding at home, but there's got to be a certain limit where you start to lose sleep at night. Now, if you're storing in a precious metals IRA, those metals have to be stored in an approved depository. So our depository, SWP, is an approved depository. We've stored IRA metals since 2016. We happen to be one of the only vaults in the world that does it offshore. So you have the benefit of storing your metal offshore outside the United States. But there are also a lot of depositories in the US, obviously, where you can store your IRA precious metals. And I'm sure Scott and Advanta can fill you in on all of your options to do so. I'm not necessarily going to harp on this one very long, but I wanted to include a few images of what does a storage facility look like. When you talk about gold storage, what are we talking about here? So this is our own facility that we own and operate in the Cayman Islands. I lived there for 3 years when we started the company. A great experience. We built this beautiful building. It's a very strong, it's basically a bunker, a Category 5 hurricane rated building that houses a Class 3 vault, which is the highest rating of vault that you can purchase in North America. Most vaults that you see inside of a bank are either a Class 1 or a Class 2. But probably more importantly are these two pictures here. When people say, like, what does the storage look like? Where is my metal held? The picture on the left, these are where I would say about 80% of our clients, including all of our IRA storage clients, their metals are held in these industrial bins, which have a unique license plate. LP stands for license plate, just like a car. And those license plates tell us who does this material belong to and where inside of the vault is it located. So everyone gets their own 100% allocated, segregated, and insured bin. So allocated and segregated means that the metal is allocated to the owner and it's fully segregated from the neighbor's metal. So everyone has their own bin. There's no commingling of assets there. And they're always insured, of course. And also you have these unique identifier seals on the bins as well, which helps us audit them. Another storage option that's available within a lot of vaults, including our own, is safe deposit boxes, like at the bank. The advantage here being that the metals inside those safe deposit boxes are actually insured for full replacement value. Scott, any questions at this point about storage?
Yeah, we actually had a couple come up, Mark, in regards to buying and also the storage a little bit. Since we're right on storage right now, I will ask these questions. First question is it possible to have an IRA account as well as a personal account that is not linked to my IRA? And I guess that kind of going along the storage aspect of it, if someone's buying from you, for example, they're using their IRA and personal funds, are those metals kept in separate bins and separate, basically allocated and segregated from each other?
Yes, they are, and exactly. So those are two separate accounts. The IRA account would be managed in a partnership with Advanta or another IRA custodian, and the non-IRA precious metals would be an account that's administered directly with SWP. So in fact, what you'd end up with is two of those bins. One would have the IRA metals in them, and one would have the non-IRA metals.
One other question to ask you, what is the cost to safekeep precious metals with you?
Right. So there are two models, again, the non-IRA model and the IRA model. And it's interesting, the IRA model is much more cost effective, I guess you could say, on the storage side. And Scott, I don't want to speak on your behalf as to what, because the billing for the storage of IRA precious metals is actually administered through Advanta. So we're not the ones sending the billing to the client. I believe we're working on a $225 fixed storage schedule with you guys.
Right.
But please correct me if I'm wrong on that number. So the advantage there for IRA precious metal holders is that they have a fixed annual amount. It doesn't fluctuate based on the amount of gold or silver in the box, and it also doesn't fluctuate based on the quantity. So the quantity or the market value, which over time is likely going to increase. But if that fixed storage rate remains the same, that's extremely advantageous for the depositor. Whereas with non-IRA holdings, we charge on a percentage of value basis. So gold is between 0.5% a year to 0.75% a year, and silver is basically 0.75% to 1.25% a year. So depending on the value and quantity that the person holds, that will dictate how much they pay for non-IRA storage.
Other question. I don't know if you're going to get. You might get into this here in a minute. You obviously indicated you guys are located in the Cayman Islands, and so someone asked, "What is there a benefit to storing precious metals inside the U.S. Versus outside?" And obviously, what if there is a benefit? What is it?
It's a great question. I think it's important, because we're talking about IRAs to kind of answer that part first. Now, since it's an IRA, it's a registered investment, and Advanta is a company that has obligations, obviously, to the IRS and to the U.S. government in terms of record keeping reporting. And I'm not going to try to answer that question because I'm not an IRA specialist like Scott is. But so even if you're holding precious metals in the IRA offshore, it's still a registered investment. None of that changes. Your tax obligations don't change or anything like that. But the added benefit for the IRA storage is that in a worst case scenario, if you're worried about the situation in the United States and you're worried about things like physical confiscation or anything like that, you're benefiting from the fact that those precious metals are physically located somewhere else. But the advantages when it's non-IRA precious metals are much lengthier. The list is quite a bit lengthier, and really I'd say the number one advantage for non-IRA metals is the amount of privacy that you receive. Because if you're purchasing precious metals and storing them offshore, it's a non-reportable. For non-IRAs, it's a non-reportable asset class. So if you go on the IRS's website, it's one of the only investments that Americans can hold offshore that's non-reportable to the IRS. And so that's extremely attractive to some American clients who, in simple terms, are just sick of Uncle Sam knowing everything they do, and they want some sense of privacy, and they want to store assets without having oversight from the IRS, and that's completely legal. And that's one reason that people store precious metals in the Cayman Islands and in Singapore and in Zurich and in New Zealand, all places that we offer to our clients.
And I don't know if you want to address these. So I know you were talking about buying metals a minute ago, so I had a couple questions on that as well. Someone asked, I guess, when talking about obviously what fees are associated with buying precious metals, and another individual's, I guess, concern was the premiums for both buyback price and spot price that you buy. Obviously, you pay a little bit more than just what the spot price is
Yeah.
when it comes to buying the metals. If you can talk just for a little bit, I guess, and maybe this is something you were going to go over as well. What your fees are for buying precious metals typically, and I guess the other question is, is there any relief for the premiums that are on some of those buying physical gold or silver?
Right. So the short answer there is the premium, and this is the last slide. So I'm brought up this slide now, and I want to show this. I'm going to kind of talk through it and use this slide as we answer these questions. But the theory is the premium or the cost for the product that you're buying is going to depend on a few factors. It's going to depend, number one, on which product you select. So not each product carries the same premium. As a general rule, the larger the denomination of product, the lower the premium is going to be over the spot price. So if you're buying, earlier, Scott, you asked about the smallest denomination possible, these 1/20th ounce gold coins. The premium on that is going to be, it's not an investment product, it's a collectible product. It's probably going to be like 20% over spot. But if you're buying a 1 ounce gold coin or a 1 ounce bar, that premium is going to come way down from like 20% down to like the 3 or 4% range. And if you go even bigger, if you get into like 10 ounce gold bars, kilo gold bars, 400 ounce gold bars, your premium is going to drop like down to 3%, 2%, 1% over the spot price. So the larger the quantity or format, so either format and or quantity, generally your premiums are going to come down. So that's an important rule to remember. And also the other factor is the type of metal. So gold generally has the lowest premiums amongst all metals. Silver, so for example, a 1 ounce gold coin, like I said, would be like 3 or 4%. A 1 ounce silver coin right now, the demand for these is astronomical, and the premiums have been driven up by that demand. And so the premium on like a 1 ounce silver coin could be in the range of like 8 to 10% right now, which is really high in my opinion. I think people should go towards those 10 ounce, 100 ounce silver bars and knock their premium down accordingly. So it depends on type of metal, denomination, and also the market conditions. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of demand for physical precious metals right now. So the producers and the wholesalers are marking up those products. They're asking more for them because there's such high demand globally. So market conditions can really impact premium. So the important takeaways here is that you want to understand those basic rules, and then you want to start shopping for the best deal. And this is the purpose of this last slide. So bear with me. I'm going to kind of jump into this last slide so you guys see it. You've got, for the gold price here, you've got two prices. You've got the ask price and you've got the bid price. The ask price is what we use when someone is buying precious metals from the dealer. So they're asking, think of it that way, they're asking to buy precious metals. So in this example, the ask price is $1,786. There's a premium for the physical product. That premium covers the production of the physical product, the shipping of the physical product, and then obviously the retail markup of that physical product. The whole kind of supply chain is earning a living in that $50 premium. So the actual total cost to the investor for a 1 ounce product would be somewhere in the range of $1,836 for a 1 ounce. In this case, I would say a 1 ounce bar would probably be realistically about $1,836. And then when you're selling, we would use the bid price. So we're bidding on the product. The precious metal dealer is bidding on the product from the client. So in this example, bidding $1,785 minus a $5 discount, we would say, per ounce, so just under the spot price. And the total amount of money they would get back from the dealer is $1,780. So if you bought that coin or that bar today, and then you sold it immediately, you'd be looking at a total spread. And this is what investors need to understand, a total spread of $56 or about 3% per ounce. Now that calculation, so the difference between the total that I paid and the total that I'm getting when I sell it is called that total spread. And that is the number that investors want to look at. You want to determine which products have the best total spread, and you want to buy those products because you're lowering your overall cost to attain and to sell those products. And when you speak to a precious metal dealer and you say, I'm looking for the products with the lowest total spread, that person is then going to do their homework and come back to you with a short list saying, hey, these are the best deals I have right now in terms of total spread. So that's the magic number that investors should be looking for.
Yeah, Mark, I think that's incredibly helpful, obviously, for the people who are especially newer to investing in precious metals and what's involved. That's incredibly helpful. So I guess one other question that came up, someone asked if you have a minimum cost for your storage. Again, we talked about with the IRA side of things, it's basically it's a flat $225 a year fee for the storage, and our work as a custodian to hold that metal. So, what do you have a minimum cost you do for, say, some individual storage? I know you mentioned there was a few factors there, but do you have a minimum cost that you would charge?
We do. We have a minimum annual cost for non-IRA storage, which is $200 US. So, yeah, I mean, it's not very high, but it allows us to cover the basic costs of onboarding the client, offering the insurance for any metals that they have, and also it includes a third-party audit. So yeah, it's in the same range as that IRA amount.
Another question came up and said, is there any concern at your Cayman location about storage capacity being full? And maybe if so, there are plans to expand it or whatnot. Just maybe address that question that just popped up.
Yeah, it's a great problem to have. And if you had asked me that question a year ago, I would have brushed it off and said, no, we've got plenty of room. But this last year has been phenomenal for precious metal dealers and vaulting facilities because the demand has been so high. We are working currently on actually the design and construction of a brand new facility in Grand Cayman. So we're going to move out of our current building and move into a facility that's going to offer us about 2.5 times more storage. So it's not a concern today. We have enough storage to get us across those 2.5 years looking ahead. But yeah, we're actively working on the design of a new building right now.
Great. And going back to, obviously you have the slide up here when we're talking about the spread, the difference here and being that it's such an important aspect when you're buying and selling gold and silver. Someone said the spread can change though, correct? Is if the price of gold goes up to $2,000, when I sell at the then bid
Mhm.
price right. And so maybe just any comments or thoughts on that question, or confirming that that's correct.
It is correct, and again, that's it's a great question, and it's obviously someone doing their homework. So the spread will change. The total spread will change based on market conditions. In a very hot market, that spread will be wider. You'll typically have kind of such high premiums on the purchase side that it'll drive that spread to be wider. On the flip side of that, in cool markets, which happens in precious metals probably about 70% of the time, it's a relatively cool market. Those spreads will narrow. So it's actually a great time to be buying precious metals. And we're starting to see a little bit of a cooling market right now. So there are some deals out there, whereas 10 months ago there was no deals. Like it's just crazy spreads all the time. So again, it's when you get to the point where you're really thinking about spreads, I suggest you speak to your account representative or your trusted precious metal dealer and really try to identify the best deals out there for you.
Another question came up. Obviously, we're talking here because we're U.S. based, talking about the IRAs, United States based retirement accounts. Question came up, said, can you store precious metals for Canadian RRSPs, the Canadian retirement plans?
It's a good question. Actually, we do. We do have we don't store them, however, in the Cayman Islands. The difference between U.S. IRAs, or one of the key differences between U.S. IRAs and Canadian RSPs, is that Canadian RSPs have to be stored at the Royal Canadian Mint in Ottawa. It's a requirement of the Canadian government. So we act as the dealer. You can buy the metal from us, and then the storage actually happens at the Royal Canadian Mint in Ottawa. And the equivalent of the IRA custodian, being the Canadian custodian in this case, is a company called Questrade in Canada. So any Canadian probably is familiar with Questrade. They're a pretty large outfit, and that's the partnership, is SWP, Questrade, and the Royal Canadian Mint.
So one other question, someone getting back, I guess, to the total spread, benching, they're saying, I guess there's maybe a 6% premium for Canadian maple gold leafs on your currently that you have, but is there a difference when you talk about total spread? Sometimes, obviously, there's U.S. gold coins, there's Canadian gold coins, there's Australian, there's German, etc. Sometimes the spread vary between the different manufacturer of the actual coin or bar itself.
They do exactly. So we actually did an episode on our YouTube channel about our top 10 recommended precious metal products. Probably worth checking out if you're interested. And we try to identify the best premium total spreads, and generally the U.S. Mint has very good total spreads. U.S. Mint products are very expensive to purchase relative to competing mints like the Royal Canadian Mint or the Perth Mint of Australia. Or even bars, but they have such a great resale value that because of the most sought after coins in the world, that the total spread is actually quite competitive for the U.S. Mint. The Royal Canadian Mint is a little bit cheaper on the buy side, and you'll get a little bit less when you sell it. But a lot of the times, the best spreads come down to bars, to large format bars. So, like for example, in that first slide, if you remember, we had the 100-ounce silver bar. A lot of the times, and I'm not saying today because the market, dictates, but a lot of the time in a quieter market, those large bars are my recommendation to my clients about the best products to buy. So you definitely want to factor those in as well.
Gotcha. Well, Mark, I want to thank you very much for your time. I'm going to take control back over here again and just show you, so you have your email address here, and you certainly give it any other contact information you want to give out to anyone. So, and actually, I had a shout out, somebody here on the webinar said shout out to one of your representatives that helped their first gold purchase last December. So it was very, very, very helpful. So
Great.
Kudos to one of the attendees for you guys there. But Mark, how else can people get a hold of you? Obviously, you have your email address here. You have the YouTube link, and again, I have the copy of Mark's slides as well as obviously mine. If you are looking for a copy and you want to have it, just simply email me. I'll get you my information here again in a minute. Email me, I get you a copy of the slides. How else can people reach you, Mark?
Yeah, it was actually the very, very last slide, Scott. I pulled it up now. I don't know if you want to flip back for a second.
Sure.
All the contact details are on there. I'll just share that. our website, swpcayman.com, we have a page dedicated to IRAs. So if you're specifically looking for IRAs, Advanta will be on there. So you can kind of understand the relationship between us and Advanta. Obviously, the phone and email. We've got a great YouTube channel. It is entirely dedicated to educational pieces like what you're doing, Scott, at Advanta. We think education is the key to success. And so there's a series called Inside the Vault. It's got 16 episodes. Basically, we do stuff like this throughout the episodes. Only we're sitting inside the vault in Cayman, so we've got all these cool products to touch and feel and play with. And then obviously, if you want to follow us on Twitter, we give live market updates and things like that.
Good, absolutely. Yeah, I would encourage again anyone who has questions. Extremely knowledgeable, very interesting webinar, Mark. I really appreciate again you coming on. It's something that we don't, like I said at the beginning, don't talk about precious metals a lot, or haven't had a lot of content on that. And so certainly maybe we'll look to bring you back again soon, because I think the information is great. It's something that I think a lot of people are interested in and don't always know where to start. So it's obviously I would encourage people to take this information down on this slide, reach out to Mark, reach out to his team to get more information about precious metals investing in general. And again, if you want a copy of the slides, just please reach out to me. Again, my name is Scott Maurer, the host here at Advanta IRA. You can reach me. Just email me. I'd be more than happy to send you a copy of all the slides from today's presentation. But Mark, any parting thoughts? I guess maybe one question is there something people need to one piece of advice you'd say give to somebody looking to get started in precious metals? What would be your main pieces of advice to them?
Yeah, I appreciate that question, Scott, because I think so. Educate yourselves, number one, and we've started that today. So if you've enjoyed this discussion, there's a lot more education available to you. We're willing to, obviously have those conversations with you. So educate yourselves. Find a trusted precious metal dealer, whether it be us or someone more locally to you. But the parting advice really is, if you have not done it yet, get started. I've seen the benefits of precious metals in people's portfolios and their personal lives. They sleep easier at night knowing that they own them. And it does really a great job of balancing your portfolio and offering you a hedge like no other product on the planet. And that's why gold has been around for 6,000 years. It works extremely well. We know what it does. We know when it does it. And I really encourage people to get started. If it's just 1/20th ounce of gold or 1 ounce of gold or 1 ounce of silver, for that matter, just start the journey. I think it'll be very beneficial to you.
All right, thanks, Mark. Well, thank everybody again for attending today. Again, if you're listening to the recorded version of this, please reach out to Mark or myself with any other questions you have. So Mark, thank you again for your time.
Hey, it was a pleasure, Scott. Look forward to speaking to you again soon.
All right, and everyone who again listening live, make sure to join us for more of our upcoming webinars that we have weekly, as well as our Pitch, Promote, and Prosper events that we hold on Fridays. Again, thank you again for listening.